Welcome back to Off Ball Takes. This is your host, Sharby Laws, and this is my co-host.
Christopher Wells.
We're here with you guys for a live episode. A live breakdown, live recap of, all that's transpired in the Olympics so far. So we're going to be talking about Team USA versus South Sudan. And, we do see some crazy comments in the chat, but, I think the just give us the gold one is a pretty accurate statement of how you can pretty much wrap this game up. Before we do get started, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the OBT Podcast for more content and updates.
Yes. So Team USA just finished with their game against South Sudan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this was kind of a big game because I think the winner, would be able to kind of, move up into the next round. Again, Team USA was favored and they did not disappoint. They had some interesting changes at the beginning of the game. Right before the game began, there was an announcement of a new starting five, right? Again, you had three guys still in there, but you took out a couple, right? Drew Holiday came out. Joel Embiid came out as well, which I don't think either of us thought was going to happen. And they put in Jason Tatum, who they said was going to play. And then they put in Anthony Davis as well, right? So it allowed them to get off to a better start. They I guess South Sudan did kind of cut into the lead early, but then eventually, again, same thing kind of happened where Team USA eventually pulled away. And then, never really looked back. It got close at one point. I think they cut it to 11 a couple of times, but you never really felt like they were going to lose, and they still ended up winning by 17. Homelander says SGA is going to go off against USA even though they won't win. And, what did you think of the defense in this game, right? Because it felt like it was better than it had been in the last few games where like we saw the other team getting to 100 or it felt like they were scoring more at will. But this one it felt like there were certain stretches where it was really tough for South Sudan to score.
I mean, me personally, I thought the number one factor is you don't have Joel Embiid in the lineup. South Sudan previously in the exhibition games, they were kind of drawing him out of the paint. And that was kind of one of the main factors versus, where you have Bam Adebayo or Anthony Davis, which are guys that can really, guard positions really 1 through 5. So, having those two guys out there and them being able to switch back and forth, I think was awesome and amazing. And that was a huge catalyst for why, the defense looks so good. And then obviously, you have other guys that I feel like, you already talked about it when we were talking about exhibition games where some of these guys feel a lot more comfortable showcasing the fact that they're able to defend because they're surrounded by some other elite defenders as well. So, you look at what Derek White was able to do, even a guy like Jason Tatum, trailing guys, blocking shots and being there for D boards and stuff like that. So, a very impressive all around win for the United States. But yeah, I think it does start with the defense because you look at it, they didn't really allow Sudan to do anything that they were able to do in the first exhibition game.
Right. And that's kind of the key here because we know that they have a number of really good offensive players, but you got to be able to do both, right? You got to be able to play both ends of the floor. And, again, this was, they had 103, which is still a decent amount of points, right? Considering it's 10-minute quarters, but, and they also shot 43% from three, 53 from the field. But again, limiting South Sudan to 86 points, right? Shooting 42 from the field. I mean, they shot 38% from three, which is nice. But still 42 from the field, that'll get it done, especially when you shoot 53 and 43 from three yourself, right? Leading scorer, Bam Adebayo, 18 points, 7 rebounds, right? Taking advantage of, the increased opportunities, right? With Embiid not playing at all, right? They kind of split the starting front court minutes, right? With him and AD. And, Bam, he shot 2 of 3 from three. He had some possessions defensively where he was elite, especially, when he was switched out onto the perimeter. So just, great game from him, right? The front court, I think, looked a lot better in this game than it did in the previous game. And like you said, I think part of that was the changing of, the rotation, right? Where, again, no Embiid, but instead you bring in Tatum, you bring in, Bam and AD. They play more. So, it's good to see even Halliburton, right? He got more minutes in this game, because he was a DNP in the last game too. Right, he didn't play as much, only 7.5 minutes, but he did make 2 threes, had an assist. So I'm curious to see what it looks like in the next game, right? Because again, is Durant going to continue to come off the bench, and this is just going to be a minutes thing where they manage his minutes, right? Does he ever start? I don't know, but the starting five, I thought this one was the best one of the ones that we've seen.
Yeah, when I saw the starting lineup pop up on the screen, I was like, now this is what I'm talking about, and it mainly goes it comes back to Embiid for me. I think Anthony Davis and Bam Adebayo, they just fit better on the Olympic stage. I think, considering
Better shape too.
who you're going up against, because you can clearly tell Embiid is still a little bit hurt from the last NBA season. But yeah, looking around at this game, I thought starting Jason Tatum was an interesting move. I think it added a little bit of versatility versus some other things. But me personally, I would have preferred to have seen Kevin Durant start. But nonetheless, I think the adjustment was elite for sure, because even Devin Booker being in there, I think that's awesome as well. And a lot of these guys, I think the cool part is you get to see them kind of in roles that they're not in the NBA a lot sometimes. So, you get to see Tyrese Halliburton be a spot up guy, Anthony Edwards being a spark plug. So all around, I think great coaching. And, I think Steve Kerr's point about this isn't the NBA, you kind of have to push that aside a little bit and, play as a team in a country. I think that's kind of the name of the game here.
Right, yeah, because like you mentioned with the roles that they're not used to, right? Joel Embiid being a DNP, right, wouldn't be something he would normally be used to. But, against this team, right, which is, a smaller team but a faster team, that's probably the right call, because, you needed to, even when Team USA goes smaller without Embiid, you can still put some big lineups out there, and you still have the ability to, move around with your bigs and be versatile with your bigs, with those lineups. So I think this one made a lot more sense. So, I mean, again, the Homelander mentioned SGA is going to go off against Team USA, even though they won't win. I mean, you still have some defensive guards, right? So that'll be a matchup where you'll probably have to see more of Derek White and Drew Holiday, right? So that way you can kind of have guys that can match up, against the SGA, right? Not that Steph isn't going to play at all, right? But it's just, he'll probably have to be out there with those guys a little bit more, right? Because you still, there's going to be a game where, Steph shot 1 for 9 in this game, but there still will be a game where you'll need, his offense, right? Like there'll be a game where you'll need more than 3 points from him. And either way, like him just being out there, right? Is just, that's another guy that you have to, guard out there and actually pay attention to. So, again, there will be a different game each game where one of these guys will have, their moments, right? Like say in the last game, right? Like Durant, right, had the big game coming off the bench, right? And LeBron had his game too, right? In this game, you didn't need LeBron to score as much, right? Because you got contributions from a lot of other guys, and the defense, right, kind of made it so that you didn't have to have a scorching, blistering offensive game in order to win, right? Because they still shot well, right? But I think in the last game, it was like, 60 from the field, 50 from 3, something like that. And that's not, that's not a sustainable way to win.
Yeah,
right?
It was a super hot night.
This is a little bit closer.
Yeah, very hot night for them in the exhibition game. But, I think no matter what the outcome is, you love the story of South Sudan and what they've been able to accomplish, I think, on this stage thus far. They've got some ballers. And, I was very impressed with what they were able to do coming out against this team, because I just didn't think that, we would ever see the game be kind of close as it was, when it was the exhibition game. So I think, you still have to tip your hat, like Jones, Omat, even a guy like Wenyen Gabriel, like to be able to grab 10 rebounds against, some elite NBA talent, I think is awesome. So, I think there's a lot that you can really shout out and tip your hat to, no matter what the outcome is for South Sudan. Yeah, exactly. What's the other guy's name? He's been all over the place. Shayok. Yeah, he's been awesome. Like, and people don't realize a lot of these guys are playing for not just their country, but their livelihood, their contracts and things of that nature. So yeah, shout out to those guys, 100%.
Yeah, exactly. So, now Team USA, right, they'll be able to move on, right, to the next, grouping, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I don't think that game has been, I guess when is the next one, right? It's the 3rd, right?
Yes.
So I think they play, August 3rd. So they play Puerto Rico, right? Who also played today, right?
Mm-hmm.
They lost to Serbia 66-107, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, yeah, exactly. And we know Serbia's team, right? They lost to, Team USA, the other day, right?
Yeah.
So we know who's on Team Serbia, right? Jovic, Bogdanovic, right? Micic and others. Right, but for Puerto Rico, right, that team, right, you do have some NBA guys on there, right? You have Jose Alvarado, you have Davon Reed, right? So yeah, and I think Tremont Waters, who at one point was in the NBA, but not anymore, right? But he's on there, I think, as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some NBA, caliber guys on there, but it's still a team that you probably would say that Team USA should win. And I think it's a small team too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so it's another team that I think that they should probably do pretty well against. I'm curious to see if the rotation stays the same or if it changes a little bit. Because we did see a couple of guys get banged up today, right? We saw Derek White; he had that back thing kind of flare up, and then I think Holiday and AD, they had a couple of moments where it looked like they may have, hurt their ankles, but they were able to still, go out there and play. So, obviously they'll get some time off, right? It's about, 3 days off. So
Yeah.
they'll probably be, fine, but, we'll see.
Yeah, a lot of those injuries you were talking about seemed like maybe like self-reported stingers or whatever, just where you kind of turn your ankle, things of that nature. So I think they'll be all right. But I am curious, what they kind of go into the next game with, what that mindset is going to be like. Because you could kind of tell they took this personally. Like they're like, maybe we shouldn't have really, only beat South Sudan by 1 point in an exhibition game. And you could clearly see that was the message. Yeah. Like,
both you and I expressed that this was coming, where they were going to have a more demonstrative performance against South Sudan than in the previous matchup, right?
Yeah.
And again, like it got close a handful of times, but you never felt like they were going to lose.
Right. Like you always kind of felt like the lead was safe, especially the way that even like the starters came out and like really threw a good punch. And then obviously I think the highlight for sure is the bench unit. And it has been throughout, our entire coverage of this. Like they've been insane. They've really been the glue. And they fit really seamlessly, like everybody kind of falling into a role that they're comfortable with and that they're elite at. I think that's the beauty and the magic of this team.
Yeah. So do we assume Joel Embiid is going to play again at some point?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think they're probably saving him for a matchup where you can actually see his impact in a positive way. Because I feel like if he was out here, they would have just ran to the rim, especially early and whenever he's out there. Because it's kind of hard to pair Embiid with a guy maybe like Bam or AD, per se, where those guys can kind of fit together. So that's kind of the problem there. But I think he does play because he'll play against Puerto Rico, right?
Yeah, I'm going to assume that at some point we'll see him again, because it just looked like he may have just needed a little bit of time to
that's
rest
fine.
and recover. We'll see.
Yeah.
There were also 4 games yesterday, right? You had Spain and Greece. Right, they played and Spain won 84-77, right? So Greece obviously lost that game, right?
Rico, right?
Again, comparing the teams, right? For Greece, we know, right? That's Giannis's team, right? There's a few other former NBA players out there as well, right? I think we already mentioned those before. Nick Kalathis, Georgios Papagiannis, right? Kostas Papanikolaou, right? So there are some former NBA players on there in addition to Giannis, but it just wasn't really enough, right? And again, can't blame Giannis, right? He did his thing, 27 and 11, with 4 steals, I think, and 2 blocks. But then you look over at Spain, right? Again, some NBA, guys, right, that we remember, right? The Hernan Gomez brothers, right? Usman Garuba, Alex Abrines, right? Former NBA player, right? Santi Aldama, current Grizzly. Rudy Fernandez, right? That's an older NBA guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I think Lorenzo Brown played at one point on a couple of NBA rosters. So, but then also you look around, right? The Canadian team, they beat the Australian team, right? 98-83, right? Obviously, we know Team Canada, right? That's a very good team, right? You got a lot of good NBA players on there, right? You got SGA, right? Jamal Murray, RJ Barrett, right? Andrew Nembhard, Dylan Brooks, Olynyk. So, very good team over there. Lou Dort as well. Australian team, they lost. And they have some good players as well, right? I don't think Ingles or Dellavedova played, but you still have Dante Exum, Josh Giddey, Dyson Daniels, Patty Mills, Josh Green, and others. So I mean, we'll see. And then, but the big game was the Japanese France game, right? Because that was the game where Team Japan, right? They were, going back and forth with France. Right, obviously with the Japanese team, right? That's Yuta Watanabe, which is probably not the first name I should have mentioned, but also you have Rui Hachimura out there as well, right? Who had 24 points, 3 rebounds. He got tossed at one point in the game, with the flagrants, which a lot of people felt was kind of bogus. And then France, right? They basically ended Japan with the 4-point play, right? Obviously, we know the French team's got Wembanyama, right? Nicholas Batum, Frank Ntilikina, Rudy Gobert, right? So Evan Fournier, number of good NBA players out there. So what did you think of that call, right? Because again, that was one where it seemed like a lot of people felt like it was a bad call.
The
And we've
4 point
seen like,
play.
no, the other one, the flagrants, right?
Oh,
where
the Rui
got
ones.
tossed.
I mean,
Yeah.
it is what it is, but
Mhm.
because me personally, I don't really think it was that egregious. If
Mhm.
you want me to be honest, I've seen
Right.
worse that wasn't called flagrant. So that's kind of my take on it. But at the end of the day, it's international rules, so it's a little bit different than what we're accustomed to watching, on a night in night out basis. But
Yeah.
I think my highlight from this game, obviously, yeah, shout out to Rui. He had an awesome game up until he was thrown out. But
Yeah.
France, yeah, Wemby's that guy. And they even have some other great players surrounding him. So I feel like, hey, look, the Spurs need to take notes. And I think they have in terms of, potentially building a solid core around this guy. Because, if you surround him with a lot of talent, I'm sure, he's going to look 10 times better. And he has throughout the Olympics.
Yeah, he could easily challenge for possibly, we'll see. They would probably still need to win some more games, but he could be like an all NBA guy next season.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a top 10 NBA player. That might be a hot take. I don't know, but
Yeah, and then last but not least, right, you had the German team, right? They beat Brazil, right, 86-73, right? Germany, that was the other team that kind of put up a fight against Team USA, right? That's Dennis Schroeder's team, right, with the Wagner brothers, as well as Daniel Tice, Isak Bonga, right, and others. So, it's kind of expected, right? Like, none of these are really shockers, right? Obviously, like, the Japan one would have been an upset over France, and it was close, right? It looked like that they could have pulled it off, but none of these were really necessarily shockers.
yeah, agreed. It's funny how you called it Schroeder's team. Anytime I think of Germany, I just think of Wagner, Franz, that is. But yeah, I mean, I think they're up there in terms of the top three villains for the USA in this in these Olympics. So I would say like it's probably Germany, Canada, and France at this point that are probably kind of waiting in the wings to see if they could potentially take out Team USA. But from what I've seen from Team USA, no shot. I think they're going gold this year. So
I think it feels like that they're getting closer to to being a lot more cohesive. And once you get that done and you get the lineups and everything set up, then I think you're pretty much good.
Yeah, they have the level of seriousness that they were lacking, I think, in the exhibition games.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of, that is a factor, right? Where it's like, you can sometimes see like when you play hard, right, it can make a big difference, right? You could be a team that has a lot of talent, but if you don't put in the effort, that's how a team that isn't as talented, especially if they're playing hard, can really challenge you, right?
Yeah.
But when we see Team USA put in the effort, right, because they had stretches where they're picking up guys basically, full court, right, or they're sprinting on closeouts, or as you mentioned with Tatum and others, right, going after those rebounds and clearing the possession so they can, start their offense, right?
KD.
That's that matters, right? And that's why you have some of those guys out there, right? As opposed to, other guys where, say, like with an Embiid, this game, an up and down game wouldn't have been good for him, right? But a game where it's a lot slower paced, it will probably be fine, especially if he can, move
Absolutely.
at all. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, so again, that next game, August 3rd against Puerto Rico, again, I expect another quality performance. I think that I don't think it'll be. I mean, again, like it's kind of hard to say like, oh, we're gonna win by 25, 30 plus, because when you start talking about that big of a margin, it's kind of difficult to just automatically assume. But
Sure.
I think that we'll see an even better performance against the Puerto Rican team, assuming the team tries, assuming that we got guys are healthy and we see a similar level of effort, right? I think we'll see a dominant performance, right? Where again, maybe it's close, maybe it's competitive in the first couple of minutes, because we've seen that a lot, right? But they'll eventually pull away, and I think we'll come out of that saying like, wow, that was a great win.
Yeah, I'm really looking at the size, the wings as well, our wings, and our defense. I think those are going to be the three factors that kind of put us over the edge here. Because like you said, they're a smaller team. So what do you do with a smaller team? You kind of abuse that and put out your elite wings, your 3-and-D guys, and then, they'll seal the deal for you, and we've seen that. It really goes back to the second unit because whatever that lineup is going to be, and if Durant continues to come off the bench, it's GG's.
Yeah, exactly. Just the level of talent you have that can come off the bench is a luxury, right? Because other teams just don't necessarily have that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot of guys that are able to do multiple things. So then, which we kind of talked about, which is especially, emphasized when you see who they're also playing alongside of, right? Because say like a Kevin Durant, right? Him next to other good defenders, he'll look better defensively than he'll probably look for Phoenix. Not saying he was bad in Phoenix defensively, but you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's easier for him to do a lot of that stuff, right?
He's
Like
playing pat. Yep,
lane.
exactly. You took the words out of my mouth.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a lot easier to do that type of stuff, with this personnel. So then that's what makes it really scary. Because then again, like, how many guys on this team, would you say are weak links defensively? Like maybe only like a couple, right?
Maybe Curry. That's really it, if you want me to be honest. And that's not even really like, he can't really help that considering his size.
Like if that's your worst, and if him or a Halliburton, right, who doesn't play as much, right, like if those guys are your worst defenders, and it's like a sea of other really really good defenders, it doesn't matter too much, right? Like because we saw some possessions where like I think it was Carlik Jones, right, he got a few blow-bys, but again, like
I mean, he blew by LeBron, that happens,
right? Yeah, exactly, and like by that point the game was, we knew they weren't gonna win, and we knew that Team USA was going to win, right? So like naturally you're going to kind of take your foot off the gas a little bit, once you're kind of in a spot where you're pretty comfortable. So
yeah,
but
shout out to Bron too.
Like, what?
I said shout out to Bron too, what he's been able to do.
Exactly. And that's kind of the key thing there, is that like when you have a guy like a LeBron where like we don't have to have you score almost 30 a game to be a competitive team, right? Like now you can kind of play, as everybody else has kind of been mentioning, sort of like a Draymond Green plus role, right? Where he can get you some rebounds, he can run your offense, right? He can switch out defensively, and he can get, and the plus part is because of the scoring. I mean, he's also just better, but you know what I mean. But just putting those guys in those type of roles, it's pretty cool. And again, if the chemistry continues, right, there's no reason, we've already said why they shouldn't win gold, and we said that before, anyways. Even when people were, kind of distraught, and upset and crying over, barely winning games.
Yeah, and it's funny because like and people were echoing the same thing that we were. It's not like we're the originators of this. Like everybody's been saying like they need to dominate, they should dominate, and they will. That's kind of the thing. But it's kind of like you kind of look at the exhibition games, and the NBA just has too much talent. 10 All-Stars. Yeah, it's the truth. They're elite, and yeah, I mean you look at the other teams like. You look at South Sudan, like you probably don't know a lot of these guys. A lot of hardcore fans would know like a guy like JT Thor, like you talked about, 2K legend, or Wenyen Gabriel, Laker legend. But like, the casual NBA viewer is not going to know that. The casual Olympic viewer is not going to know that. They're probably just going to know, all the big name stars across the globe, and then obviously every single player on the United States because, that's just how good they are.
Exactly. Like who's the worst player on this team?
D White, maybe.
And if that's your worst player, I mean,
yeah, that's a guy on a championship roster, bro.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Let's be serious.
That was a starter for a championship team.
And if you choose Drew, same logic applies. I mean, like who's playing for silver?
All right, so now we're kind of getting into like Bird-esque territory, right? Where he was like, who's coming in second in the 3-point contest. I mean, we've kind of already mentioned like the teams that we think could be like a challenge, right? Not that they're going to win over Team USA, but just we've already mentioned like Canada, Germany. Who was the other team?
I said France.
France. Yeah, France. Exactly. So those 3 teams probably have the next best shot, of doing that. So like,
I feel like South Sudan might be in the play too.
Yeah, I mean it's possible. I'm curious to see what it looks like not playing Team USA.
Sure.
Because obviously, like, then it's not as big of a talent discrepancy, but say, like, with a Team France, like, that's a huge team. And there's some, good players on that team as well, right? Like, who's guarding Wemby in that group?
Right.
Like, that's a tall task.
No, you're right.
So, because that's a small team. I mean, to be fair, since he's a skinnier guy, right? Like, maybe you could get away with a smaller guy, but, I don't know. Like, it's different. So we'll see.
Yeah, because I mean they
But
handled Puerto Rico pretty nicely. If you look back
right.
on it.
Yeah, so that's what I would say. I would say probably France or Germany or Canada. That's
Yeah,
probably silver,
yeah,
right?
that,
Like
that, that makes
like two
sense.
of those three teams will probably be bronze and silver.
Agreed.
So I mean, again, I guess we could also talk about a little bit more general NBA stuff. We had I think a couple of things happen in the last couple of days. We had one that was going on, while the game happened, right? And then we had Woj tweet out Jared Allen, right? He signed a 3-year, $91 million max extension with the Cavs, right? So the Cavs pretty much locking up their core of guys, right? Because now all of their starters aside, I guess, from Isaac Okoro, right, are all under multi-year extensions, right? Because Garland signed his a while back, as a rookie extension. Obviously, Mitchell, signed his a couple weeks ago, right? Mobley signed his rookie extension, about a week ago. And then obviously Allen signed his extension, not a rookie one, but still a max extension. So pretty much all their main guys now, are on big max, deals. So it's going to be a super expensive roster. But the question is, how much better can they be? Because I think, we've seen enough that we know that they can win a lot of regular season games, right? They basically won about 50 games the last 2 seasons, each season. But can they do more than what they've been able to do so far, right? Where first year together, first round exit, and then last season, right, they, went out in the second round.
Yeah. I do like the signing or the extension, obviously. They're doubling down on it, and they're going all in on this roster that they built and constructed. They really think that Donovan Mitchell's the guy. No plans of moving Darius Garland, apparently. Like you said, handled Evan Mobley and now Jared Allen. So I feel like those are your starters. It's just if you're gonna have those guys on the same team and definitely starting together, you need to kind of do some work elsewhere and kind of refine the edges a little bit, in my opinion. But nonetheless, I don't think they're a bad team. It's just I don't know how far this team can go championship wise, because I think that should be their end goal, is to win a championship, not necessarily, just be around. Because I think with this starting 5 and, really the 4 main guys, you're going to be around for a long time, especially if none of them, if they continue to play better and get better.
Right.
But with that development, I don't know if that's still enough to win the chip. I think the guy who I would kind of be looking at the most would probably be Evan Mobley. Like if he becomes like, I'm not saying he will, but out of nowhere, all NBA. All right, now we're talking. And then you can, maybe bring in some other guys to help bolster up his role and his numbers and things like that. And make him a little bit more effective. But nonetheless, I think this is a good thing. It's not like they're shopping him. Because what were you going to get? And I think his numbers were awesome. The funny thing about Jared Allen is I had no clue he was 6'9". I thought he was like 6'11".
Oh, he was 7. I thought he was 6'11". When I learned he was 6'9", I was like, oh wow.
I was like, in theory, maybe it's the hair.
Yeah, it's probably the hair. But I mean, either way, like also the way he plays feels like, he plays like a taller guy because he's a really good rebounder, good defender. I know he didn't have a good series against the Knicks, a year or whatever ago. But he's too good to kind of just be like, we're gonna just dump him for something. And I know, people have talked about New Orleans being the possible destination, but it doesn't seem like, that anybody's interested in paying Brandon Ingram $200 million, which is understandable. Again, like it feels like maybe we've overcorrected and gone too far in terms of like now it almost feels like people are maybe underrating Ingram, but at the same time, I don't know. Like, do you feel good about paying him $200 million over 4 or 5 seasons? I mean, it kind of puts a cap on your team because then essentially that means he's one of your 2 best guys, and I don't know if he can be the second best player, on an elite team. Like he could be, I think the second best player on a really good team, but if we're talking about like a championship contender, and again, like not every team can actually be a championship contender team, but like if you're New Orleans, you're kind of at a point now where it's like Zion's closer to, like 27 than he is to 20. Right. So not that he's old at all by any means, but like he's, like you're at a point now where it's like you're kind of, you're not gonna you shouldn't just be satisfied with like, oh, we made the playoffs, awesome, right? Like now you want to do more. So with those higher expectations, now you kind of have to reevaluate, is this team good enough? Because we know this team, that team can be really good, but they still don't have a center, and you're going to need that against some of those other teams, right? It can't just be Daniel Tice, Yves Missi, and call it a day. Like that's
Yeah,
you're going to
that
get
ain't it.
crushed by some of those big teams, potentially.
Yeah, it's tough. I think the Brandon Ingram whole situation is rough because, like, not even a year ago, the guy was considered elite, underrated. He's in the same company as Trae Young, literally. Like, everyone's like, this guy's underrated sleeper, awesome bucket getter. And now it's like, you're a superstar, star, whatever you want to call him, label him, but nobody wants you. Like, the Pelicans don't want you, and other teams don't want you. I don't know what goes on here. Because I feel like he can impact the game in a winning way. It's just we haven't really seen it because he's rarely healthy. And if he is healthy, you can kind of see there are holes in his game, specifically defensively.
And I just don't think those two guys are a good fit.
No,
that's
it's horrible.
It's like, because essentially your team is built around two guys that make $200 million or whatever it is, right? They're both big max players, but they're rarely healthy. And they also don't fit that well together. So, and again, combine that with the new CBA, right? Then that makes that even tougher, right?
GG.
At a certain point, just like what we mentioned with Cleveland, right? At a certain point, Cleveland's roster is going to be, like a first, second, well, probably already first, if not close to it.
I think they are.
So at a certain point, they'll be a second apron team. And then, if that group is going to stay together, that's going to be really tough, right? To kind of, add on to that. Because once they're in that second apron, because we've already talked about it, once you get to that point, there's not a whole lot you can do. And the Cavs still probably need a little bit more, to round out their roster. And then it's like, also, what are they going to do with Isaac Okoro, right? Because there's been rumors about maybe there's a sign and trade in place, right? Like maybe he goes to Brooklyn and it's, like Dorian Finney-Smith, or Cam Johnson or something like that. Maybe he just, sticks it out on the qualifying offer and then enters unrestricted free agency in a year. I don't know, but, there's still some questions. But, it is good that, I guess, worst case scenario, like, it's better than all those guys, or a couple of those guys being in, like, the last year or two of their deals. At least now you can kind of answer those questions later. But
yeah, you have long-term security.
Right. So what do you think of the Isaac Okoro situation? Like, what do you think, ultimately happens? Because we've talked about, like, it seems like he's not a bad player. He just hasn't panned out. And it's like, if you're the Cavs, I do think you probably want a better option at that wing spot, right? Like somebody a little bit taller, right? A little bit more, and again, like he shot the ball well last year in the regular season, didn't shoot it as well in the playoffs. He can defend, he can rebound, but he's just undersized. And I think if you're the Cavs, I think you'd like a different wing option. But, do you do that for Dorian Finney-Smith, or Cam Johnson? Like, is that like an actual upgrade?
Yeah, I believe so. I think so. You look at Okoro, the frame is not ideal for this roster. If you're going to have Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell starting together in the backcourt, I want a guy like Jaden McDaniels or, somebody who's a little bit taller. Not saying, he has to be as elite as, that, but, I need a 3-and-D guy because the problem with Okoro is I feel like he made leaps this year. Not, astronomical, but career bests pretty much. So, not a bad player. I just think you need a little bit more size. And maybe even a little bit more efficiency, if you want me to be real, and a little bit more versatility. And I think Cam Johnson is one of those guys, just money-wise, kaput, man. Holy. Maybe Finney-Smith. I think that one's the interesting one, because I know that's the name that's been floating around the most.
Right,
and
because the question is a lot of people feel like he's not quite as good as he was before. But
that's
then,
valid.
you have to factor in, like you said, for Cleveland, if you go all in for Cam Johnson, then, like you said, you have an even more expensive roster because it's not like he's on a small contract. So then, because sometimes, like, if you have basically 4 max players, you almost have to round it out, like, with your 5th starter not necessarily being, a max player. That's not what Boston did, right? Because all 5 of their guys are max guys, but not every team is constructed like that. So, I'm curious to see what route Cleveland takes. Do you think that there is a world where maybe it's like, all right, we'll just try it again for one more year. You take the qualifying offer, and then, we'll see what happens from there. It's just, I think when you're on the qualifying offer, I'm not sure. I think you can kind of block trades, right? Because that's what happened with Miles Bridges, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And then obviously, then if he enters unrestricted free agency, you can't match the deal at all. So, do you think that that's a possible option that could? Well, I guess I shouldn't say whether or not it's possible because it definitely is. But is that the least likely? Like, what is the most likely scenario? Is it more likely that he gets, he gets traded, or is it more likely that he just comes back on the qualifying offer?
I think he. I think you probably they want to probably pursue the sign and trade. But like if my thing is if Cleveland's declining them, then like I guess that shows that they have value with him.
Yeah. But actually, I forgot this was his 4th season, so actually he's a free agent right now. So
I mean, he's the top. He's the top free agent ranking wise right now, and I don't know if that means a lot.
But I forgot the qualifying offer thing. I think is after year.
No, he can sign the 1-year qualifying offer.
All right,
he can.
So I was right.
Yeah. And that would be the worst case scenario for Cleveland.
Right. Yeah, because then he can block any
leave,
trade,
and he can leave the next year.
Yeah, exactly. He can block any trade, and then once he hits free agency again, he can leave for nothing. So, I mean, like you said, you would think that Cleveland would want to find something, but again, that's easier said than done. We'll have to see.
I think their goal should be sign and trade. I think the least likely is the qualifying offer because that would be a disaster, not for Okoro, but more so for Cleveland because then he can walk away for absolutely nothing.
There's still time.
Yeah.
But then I guess the downside for Okoro is, if he has a bad year 4 or 5 or whatever, right? If he has a bad year, then he won't get, that money. Whereas like if it's a sign and trade, he gets that money right now.
Right.
So, I would think he would probably prefer a sign and trade as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. So we'll see. And that's the thing. Like, there's not a whole lot left, in terms of free agency stuff anyways.
No.
There's not as many guys left. All the cap space is basically gone. So, anyone else that's left, it's either a sign and trade or possibly more than likely guys having to take, minimum contracts, right? Like Tyus Jones, which I guess, we can also, get into that, right? Where he ended up going to the Phoenix Suns and, he took the minimum contract, right? Washington didn't trade him at the deadline, couldn't engage in a sign and trade, but instead he ends up walking and goes to Phoenix, with what sounds like a guaranteed, spot in the starting 5.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's a move. We talked about it on our last episode. Please go and check that out. But, as a Wizards fan, it stings because you weren't able to flip him at the deadline for a future first round pick or whatever. Or even like a bad contract, that's what I would have preferred. But, him going to the Phoenix Suns for a minimum deal is awesome, for Phoenix. Great guy. I saw him start a lot for the Wizards. And not that it was bad per se, but you can see there are holes in his game that indicate why he came off the bench for the majority of his career in Minnesota and Memphis. So, the guy has a great assist to turnover ratio. That's all everybody talks about, and rightfully so, because it's elite. But there are times when he kind of shrinks, can take some bad shots as well. But I think he's a good mentor. He's going to help, Phoenix with their goal of, being very good in the regular season and stuff like that. But I'll kind of let you delve into the postseason stuff because I think that's where the move is very questionable.
Right, and that's what we've talked about. Where it's like, again, there's nothing wrong at all with getting him, right? Because it's a guy on a minimum contract who's better than a minimum contract player, and he does. This is a guy that we said, at the deadline last year, right, should have been a target for the Suns because of his ability to, run an offense as a backup point guard. There's a lot to like about his game. It's just, now the issue is, and maybe this is nitpicking, right? Maybe it's just me, but you still have some concerns about, okay, I know people have said he's positionally a good defender, right? But, again, the personnel he was playing next to in Memphis is a little bit different than the personnel he was playing next to, or he's going to be playing next to in Phoenix. Now, the offensive personnel is significantly better, and this will help where now Booker doesn't have to run point guard, right? Beal doesn't have to run point guard, so they can play off the ball more. They can act as secondary guys. I think it will boost their offense. I don't really know. I mean, defensively, it's probably not going to be much different. I know they have a different coach in Budenholzer, but again, the most important aspect is the personnel. Obviously, the coach can optimize it, right? Because but Vogel is supposed to be a defensive coach, right? So again, in theory, and like when you look at their defense in the regular season, right, they were 13th, which is, if you're Phoenix, that's probably what you actually would have liked. But to be fair, the issue was, they were only, and I say only in air quotes, right, ninth on offense. But that was supposed to be, like a top 3, top 5 offensive team. To be fair, a lot of that you probably have to throw out because we didn't have a ton of games where they played together. But it's, it makes them better, I guess you can say. But at the same time, it doesn't really change my feelings on where they rank in terms of, the Western Conference. I still don't think it's enough to put them in the, legitimate contenders mix, right? Like, it'll probably be another season where they'll probably win close to or more than 50 games, but they still probably won't be a top 3 or 4 seed. And come playoff time, some people are going to talk themselves into maybe they can do something, and then they don't. Because that's the problem, is you're still going to have to face at least 2 of those top, 3, 4 Western Conference teams. And, again, Tyus Jones, it'll probably make them better, like I said, but does it get them closer to Minnesota, who also got better? Does it get them closer to Dallas, where, you can quibble back and forth about how much they got better, but I would say that they did improve, at least somewhat. And then, Denver got worse, I guess, but they're still really good. They're still better than Phoenix. And then Oklahoma City got better. So that's the problem. Did they get better enough to be able to, outpace any of those other teams? I don't know. Like, yeah, you could say it'll probably be one of the most underrated signings, but, again, I need to see some more playoff productivity because because again, we talked about the playoff splits compared to the regular season splits, right? Regular season, for his career, 7 a game, 7 points, 4 assists, 45 from the field, 37 from 3. Last year, he had a great season, right? Pretty much his best season of his career, right? As a starting point guard for the Wizards, 12 points, 7 assists, a steal, 41 from 3, 49 from the field. But then look at his playoff splits. 6 points, 3 assists, 37 from the field, 31 from 3. And, his last postseason, where they played the Lakers, right? In 6 games. He had I think, good game, too, where he started in place of Ja. But he did average 4.5, 3.7 assists, 30 from the field, 16 from 3. So, a team with size and athleticism defensively is probably going to be able to kind of limit what he can do, right? Like, because we saw him play in person, right, against the Bucks, and he had a great game. But to be fair, it was also against the Bucks, right, who were definitely not a great defensive team, especially at that point. That was early in the season when they looked like a very disappointing team, to begin with. So, I mean, again, like I said, I'm not trying to say that it's a bad signing because again, you added on to your depth, you added a good player for nothing. But I feel like people may be jumping the gun on like, oh, now this team is gonna be, one of the best teams in the NBA. So, like, I don't know about that.
Yeah, I agree. Where it's like, I don't think it catapults them a tier up at all. I don't think it really moves them. The move is great. If you want to rate the move individually, you got a starting caliber guy in some eyes for the veteran minimum. So that's kind of, I think, the main takeaway. And I think you're absolutely right about the playoffs and things of that nature. And what Phoenix is probably going to be relying on when it comes to the postseason is going to be Devin Booker reproving why he's the best shooting guard in the league. And then obviously Kevin Durant taking over in the playoffs as well. You're looking at all of these guys. Yeah. And Beal, forgot about that guy as well. So you've got 3 guys, you've got a big 3 that has been significantly unproven, especially after last year. That was abysmal. So are they going to win it? Are they going to win the finals? They could, but I don't think this Tyus Jones move. No, this Tyus Jones move does absolutely nothing to change their odds for me.
Right, because even if you get out of the West, are they beating Boston? And there's no guarantee that Boston comes out of the East, right? Because there's some other good Eastern Conference teams, but I'm not sure because again,
I don't think they do.
It feels like, because it just feels like those teams' foundations are just better, right? And again, it's not because the guys they have at the top of their roster are bad. It's that I still don't think that they ideally all fit together on the same team, right? Like I think ideally, if you had Tyus Jones, Booker, and Durant, okay, that's, probably fine. And then plus whatever else you want at the 4 and the 5. But then you add Beal in there as well. And I just feel like that's going to be tough because it's like now you're going to ask Durant, to be one of your primary rim protectors on a team, where their backcourt is going to be Tyus Jones and Bradley Beal. Like, I just don't really think that's going to necessarily work. And again, like, maybe I'm wrong. They should be better on offense.
Yeah,
that is probably what will help them win more games. And at the very least, you can say it should probably make it so that their offense is not as clunky. Because that was especially the thing that I think made it rough was that they're supposed to be an offensive first team, but they didn't look like a very good offensive team, especially come playoff time. But again, you got to be able to do both. And like defensively, you can get away, I guess, because I think Denver, the year they won the title, I think they were, somewhere a little below the top 10 on defense. But they were also one of the best offensive teams. And to be fair, you still have to factor in that 2-month stretch where they basically just lollygagged and, basically did nothing. So you still have to pretty much be elite on both ends of the floor. And I just don't think that Phoenix is going to have enough to do that, mainly on the defensive end. Again, we'll see. Maybe if they can get a favorable matchup, they can make a deep run. I just don't think that I just don't feel like this group is, a title core. Like, again, Booker and Durant, sure. But then, to have Beal as opposed to $40-50 million worth of other stuff that would make more sense, I don't think so, right? It's not really disrespect to Bradley Beal, but I just don't think that group makes a lot of sense together. And with Tyus Jones, it'll make more sense, but not enough, I think, to ultimately make that much of a difference. Could be wrong, though.
Yeah, the starting 5 is what scares me for that team. I don't like it. If you want me to be point blank and honest, in terms of Tyus Jones, Nurkic, like, oh God, and if we're gonna say like, how do they match up against? Huh?
Hadn't even mentioned him yet.
Yeah, like if you look at how they match up against Boston, oh gosh, Boston has a field day just because if Porzingis is healthy, D White, Drew Holiday, like I feel like it's over because who on earth is going to be able to get stops? Like your best perimeter defender is Devin Booker in the starting lineup or Beal, either one, I guess. But and then your freaking best interior defender is going to be KD because I don't think Nurkic is a very good interior defender at this point. So.
Depends on the team. Like against a team, maybe that's with more size, but like he wasn't good against Minnesota.
Bro, he got bullied.
So and again, like if you want reasons for optimism, you could say, all right, maybe they'll be healthier. And again, now they have a better top 7 than they had last year, and they have a different coach. So like, I'm not saying that there isn't reason for optimism. I'm just saying if you're a Suns fan. I just feel like you got to be careful in regards to talking, yourself up in terms of putting yourself in that other group because those other teams I just feel like are more proven.
But yeah, agreed.
Yeah, so is there really anything else, or have we pretty much kind of covered everything?
Obviously we kicked it off with Team USA versus South Sudan. We talked about the other Olympic games that had transpired and, previewed a couple that are coming up. We talked about even who's playing for silver. We talked about also some interesting moves, that happened around the league before before our live stream. So, solid moves. We gave our thoughts on that stuff. So we appreciate everybody for coming through for this live stream, but we're kind of running up on that hour mark. So once again, thank you to all you guys who did show up and especially the ones in the chat. Zay Williams, thank you for showing up. Homelander and Keith Wells, all of you guys' interactions are super duper appreciated, and we will see you guys on the next episode. We will also be live streaming this Saturday with the Team USA's next game. So we will see you guys for that live stream, and obviously video will come out Friday. So we will see you guys on the next one.